Have you ever felt completely drained after spending time with someone? Not because you ran a marathon, but because they took something from you: your peace, your energy, your joy. The Buddha warned us centuries ago about people like this. People who can destroy your path, sabotage your peace, and steer you away from inner freedom. In this video, we'll go deep not just into Buddhist wisdom but into our own stories, our own relationships, our own lives. Because you've probably met at least one of these people, maybe even today. And by the end, you'll know how to recognize them, respond to them, and rebuild your boundaries with mindfulness, compassion, and strength. Before we begin, if you find peace and clarity through videos like this, consider subscribing to this channel. Together, we're building a quiet space on the internet for reflection, growth, and inner freedom. Now let's get started. The taker, the one who only takes, never gives. In the quiet heart of Buddhist wisdom, we are taught to observe not just the world but the energies that move through it. One of the most draining energies is that of the taker. The Buddha warned us of those who consume without gratitude, who receive endlessly without the impulse to give. Such people, he said, are like vessels with no bond. No matter how much compassion you pour into them, it vanishes into emptiness. They arrive only when there is something to gain. When your light is shining, they stand beside you to bask in it. But when you fall into shadow, they disappear. This is not friendship. This is convenience wrapped in the disguise of affection. You may recognize such a person in your own life, perhaps someone like Amanda. Always in need, always with a request, but never with a return gesture. When others ask her for support, she suddenly becomes unavailable, too busy, too overwhelmed. And yet, when she calls, there's an urgency that demands your energy, your presence, your time. But the Dhamma does not teach us to harden our hearts or turn to anger. Instead, it invites us to look clearly, without delusion. To see that giving is sacred but only when it flows from a place of balance. A relationship should be like two hands washing each other, both giving, both receiving, both becoming clean. When one hand only takes, when one person only draws from the well and never replenishes it, the well will run dry. This is not a failure of love, but of wisdom. The Buddha often spoke of wise association, surrounding oneself not with flatterers or opportunists, but with Kalyamidit, noble friends who nourish the path toward awakening. You may feel guilty when you begin to pull back from such takers. You may fear being seen as selfish. But let us ask, is it selfish to protect the flame that lights your inner temple? Or is it wisdom to recognize that your light was never meant to be consumed by those who do not honor its source? So look into your heart. Ask yourself, how do I feel after I give to this person? Do I feel nourished, peaceful, connected? Or do I feel exhausted, unappreciated, invisible? If it is the latter, then perhaps the most compassionate thing you can do is step back, not with anger, but with mindfulness. For true friendship, like true practice, is rooted in reciprocity, a mutual tending of the soul. The Buddha did not measure friends by their words, but by their presence in difficulty, their joy in your joy, and their sadness in your sorrow. So give. But do not be afraid to close the door gently to those who do not knock with respect. Your peace is a sacred offering. Protect it as you would the silence of meditation, the breath in your body, the lotus in your heart. The talker, all words, no action. And so, after the taker, the one who drains your energy through endless demands, we meet another subtle presence on the path, the talker. The talker is more difficult to discern. They do not ask much from you. In fact, they often give, at least in words. They offer visions of the future, speak of possibilities, and paint pictures with their language so beautifully that you almost feel the reality taking shape. But that's all it is, almost. A mirage. A breath of wind that never becomes rain. The Buddha called them sweet talkers. And make no mistake, the sweetness is real. But like honey laced with poison, it seduces the mind while slowly dissolving trust. Words without action are not just empty, they are destructive. They create expectations. They stir hope. And when those hopes collapse, what's left behind is not just disappointment, it is doubt. Not only in others, but often in ourselves. Take the story of Leo. Each Sunday, he promised his parents he would visit. Each Sunday, they cooked, cleaned, waited. And each Sunday, he failed to come. Not because he didn't love them, but because the promise had become habitual. He said it out of comfort, out of pattern. But slowly, his words lost weight. His parents stopped setting the table. Not out of anger, but out of grief. That is the silent cost of the talker, the erosion of faith, one unfulfilled sentence at a time. In the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha speaks of Samavaka right speech. This is not just about avoiding lies. It is about aligning our words with our actions. It is about speaking from presence, not from convenience. Every time we promised something we have no intention of fulfilling, we plant a seed of suffering in the listener and in ourselves. Over time, we become strangers even to our own voice. Speech, in Buddhism, is seen as a powerful tool. It can create peace or chaos. It can lead the mind toward liberation or deeper into delusion. And when our speech is untethered from truth, our karma follows. Even well-meaning words, when not grounded in action, become traps. So pause and reflect. Has someone in your life filled your ears with promises but left your heart empty? Have you mistaken poetic language for genuine connection? Ask yourself, gently, is this kindness or illusion? And more importantly, look inward. Have you ever spoken a promise just to ease the moment, knowing you would not follow through? It's easy. We all have. But the practice is to return. To speak less, but more truthfully. To give our words weight again. To mean what we say and say only what we mean. The talker does not always lie with intention. But intention alone is not enough. In the Dharma, integrity is action in harmony with speech. When we find people who live this way, hold them close. And when we find ourselves drifting from it, return not with guilt, but with mindfulness. For the world needs fewer promises and more presence. The flatterer, nice to your face, poison behind your back. After the taker drains your energy, and the talker clouds your path with empty words, we arrive at perhaps the most disorienting figure of all, the flatterer. This one does not steal your time. They do not burden you with favors or leave you waiting for promises never kept. No, they do something far more subtle. They play both sides of the mask, one face for you, another for the shadows. They compliment you with charm so disarming, you begin to let your guard down. They laugh at your stories, cheer your victories, and make you feel seen. But when you step out of the room, something changes. Their tone shifts. Their loyalty dissolves. Suddenly, your strengths become flaws. Your efforts become irritants. And your image so carefully cultivated is quietly unraveled in places you cannot reach. The Buddha spoke clearly about this. He called it duplicity, two-tongued speech. It is not just a betrayal of another person, it is a betrayal of the self. Because to speak falsely one way to one, another way to another is to fracture the mind. To live in contradiction is to abandon peace. James was this kind of man. In meetings, he praised Lisa's organization, her creativity, her leadership. He told her she was ready for more responsibility. But behind her back, to the manager, he planted quiet doubts. She's disorganized. She's overwhelmed. Lisa didn't know until the promotion passed her by. And by then, the damage was already done. What makes the flatterer so dangerous is not the lie itself, it is the erosion of certainty. You begin to question your own perception. Did they really mean what they said? Am I imagining things? This kind of confusion, in Buddhist psychology, is a poison. It disturbs sati mindfulness. It pulls you out of the present and into mental spirals of self-doubt. True friends, the Buddha taught, are consistent. They are whole. They speak well of you in your presence and defend you in your absence. Their praise is not a strategy, it is an offering of truth. Flattery, by contrast, is a manipulation. It may soothe your ego momentarily, but it damages your trust, your clarity, and your inner alignment. Ask yourself, has someone ever made you feel like gold in your presence, only to discover they melted your worth behind closed doors? That sting, that confusion is not your fault. It is the natural consequence of unwholesome speech. But do not harden your heart. The Buddhist path is not one of retaliation, but of clarity. You don't have to hate the flatterer, but you must recognize them. You must name the pattern, and then step away. Not in anger, not in gossip, but in stillness. Hold close those who are sincere, who may not flatter you, but who tell the truth with kindness, who celebrate your victories even when you are not in the room. These are the companions worthy of the path. And if ever you find yourself tempted to flatter, to say what sounds good rather than what is true, pause. Ask, am I speaking from fear or from love? From strategy or from sincerity? For the Dhamma is clear, speech has power. Use it not to confuse but to heal, not to decorate truth but to honor it. In a world full of noise, let your voice be a place of refuge. The reckless companion, the one who pulls you into darkness. And finally, we come to the fourth, the most dangerous of them all, the reckless companion. Unlike the taker who drains, the talker who deceives, or the flatterer who confuses, this one distracts. But not with words or demands. They distract with pleasure, with chaos disguised as fun, with excitement that, when unexamined, feels like freedom but is truly a chain. The Buddha warned us clearly in the Dhammapada, beware of those who delight in intoxication, heedlessness, and unwholesome habits. He was not condemning joy but cautioning against those whose joy is rooted in escape. These are the companions who laugh at your attempts to live mindfully, who call you too serious when you seek silence, who roll their eyes at your path because it reminds them of a direction they no longer walk. The danger of the reckless companion is not always in what they do but in what they invite you to abandon. Your discipline, your clarity, your peace. Take David, for example. A man who walked through years of fire to find sobriety, who rebuilt his life, day by day, breath by breath. But each time he returned to his old friends, they greeted him not with respect but with temptation. Just one drink, they'd say. You're fine now. They weren't trying to harm him but they did. Because they loved the version of him who was chaotic, not the one who was awake. This is how samsara works, not always with suffering, but with seduction. It whispers, come back. Don't be so rigid. Just relax. But it doesn't tell you the cost. The missed mornings. The silent regret. The internal shame. In Buddhism, Kalyamana spiritual friendship is a vital part of a path. We are not meant to walk alone. But we are also not meant to walk with just anyone. The Buddha never said, trust all. He said, choose wisely. Not everyone who smiles beside you is walking toward the light. Some are walking in circles. And if you walk with them too long, you forget where you were headed in the first place. It is not always easy to step away. The reckless companion often holds memories with you, old laughter, old versions of yourself. But growth demands courage. And courage sometimes looks like silence. Like saying no to another late night. Another reckless impulse. Another moment that feels good but costs you everything you've worked to build. Ask yourself, who in your life pulls you off the path not with cruelty, but with persuasion? Who makes you feel like you must shrink your light to keep their company? These companions may not be evil, but they are unawake. And staying close to the unawake, when you are trying to rise, is like planting your feet in soft sand and wondering why you keep slipping. The way forward is not with judgment but with clarity. The same way the Buddha observed the world, not to condemn, but to understand. So be kind, but be firm. Protect your mindfulness the way you would protect a small flame in the wind. Keep it steady. Shield it from those who stir storms for fun. And if someone truly walks with you, they will walk in the same direction. Not toward distraction, but toward stillness. Not toward indulgence, but toward freedom. Let your path be clear. Let your company be worthy of it. Protecting your peace, the Buddha's guidance on true companionship. And now, having seen the four companions the Buddha urged us to avoid, we return to a softer but no less essential question. How do we protect our peace? How do we live in a world full of voices, distractions, relationships, and emotions, yet still walk the middle path? The Buddha never asked us to cut ourselves off from life. He did not say, avoid people. He said, be discerning. He didn't encourage isolation, he encouraged wise association. For in this world, we are shaped not only by our intentions, but by the company we keep. Your environment is not just your surroundings. It is your conversations, your shared silences, the energy that flows toward you and through you. And so, the question becomes, who do you walk with? In the Sigalovada Sutta, sometimes called the layperson's code of ethics, the Buddha gave clear signs of what a true friend looks like. Not in poetry, not in mystery, but in practical truth. A true friend helps you when you are in need. They don't wait for the moment to pass. They show up in silence, in presence, in kindness that expects nothing in return. A true friend protects you when you are vulnerable. They do not expose your wounds to the world. They shield you not to control you, but to honor your dignity. A true friend speaks well of you when you are not there. Their loyalty is not for show. It is rooted in who they are, not just how they appear. And perhaps most importantly, a true friend stops you when you are heading toward harm. They'll love you enough to say, no, not to shame you, but to hold the mirror when your own reflection has gone dim. These qualities are rare, but that does not make them impossible. The Buddha did not ask us to find perfect beings, he asked us to seek sincerity. And if you find even one person who embodies these qualities, honor them. Walk with them. Grow with them. But what if you look around and realize the people closest to you don't meet these measures? What if you see the taker, the talker, the flatterer, the reckless companion, and not the true friend? Then you begin. Not by judging, but by choosing. Choosing where your energy flows. Choosing what you allow to enter your heart. Choosing who is allowed to influence the stillness of your mind. This is your sacred space. Your mind. Your path. Not everyone has the right to enter. So here is a practice, as gentle as it is honest. Make a list of the 5 closest people in your life. Sit with each name in silence. Ask, does this person bring me clarity or confusion? Peace or pressure? Do I feel uplifted or do I feel smaller? This isn't about rejecting people with flaws, we all have them. It's about noticing who is walking toward the light with me, who helps me stay awake, who reminds me to breathe, to return, to remember. And if there are few, that is still enough. In Buddhist tradition, even one Kalyamata, one spiritual friend, is more powerful than 1,000 distractions. So walk wisely, listen deeply, and honor the companions who nourish your practice not just in words, but in presence. Let your life be surrounded not by noise but by truth, not by crowns but by hearts that see you and help you see yourself. You are not being cruel when you create boundaries. You are being wise. The Buddha didn't want us to live in fear but in discernment. He knew that the people around us shape our minds, our days, even our destinies. So if someone in your life feels like one of the 4, pause, reflect, step back with compassion. And remember, letting go is also a form of love. Love for them and love for yourself. If this message resonated with you, share it. Someone you know may be struggling in silence, unsure why they feel so drained. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Every week, we share Buddhist wisdom for modern lives. Quiet reflections, spiritual truths, and most of all, reminders that your peace is worth protecting. Until next time, stay awake, stay grounded, and stay kind.